Thanks everyone for coming to this seminar, which is joint with the Department of Economics and the Center for Health Economics and Policy Studies. Thanks so much all for being here on Friday. There's enough new folks around, so I apologize for those of you who are here to hear a similar introduction yesterday. We're very fortunate to have Dan Hamermesh here today. He's the Chief Coordinator of the IZA Network and the editor of IZA World of Labor. He's a distinguished scholar at Barnard College, Professor Emeritus at the University of Texas, Austin, and at the Royal Holloway University of London. He's also taught at Princeton University and Michigan State University. He has a series of very well-known books in labor economics, labor demand, the economics of work and pay, beauty pays. The economics is everywhere in his most recent book, Spending Time. He's received a number of awards in the profession, including the Mincer Award for Lifetime Contributions to Labor Economics and the IZA Prize in Labor. So we're very fortunate to have him here for the second half of the double header of talks. And he'll present today on scholarly refereeing. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Joe. Hey, this is a different paper kind of thing from yesterday. Yesterday was a serious paper of a substantive thing, at least I think it is. This is part of a very long series of papers that I've written, which I call my gossip research. And since I view this as a little bit lighter than the other stuff, let me comment on one of the things Joe said in his introduction. So in 2013, I got this award from the Society of Labor Economics, they give out biennially, called the Mincer Prize for Lifetime Achievement. My older son saw this and said, "Dad, are they trying to tell you something?" Which I thought was pretty cool, actually. So I'm not sure that it wasn't all over them, but I'd like to think there's been a few more things since then. This one was prompted, a very neat genesis of this. Wes Wilson, who despite this mistake is in economics, not sociology, is the editor of Economic Inquiry, which is one of the, used to be called the Western Economic Journal before any of you were born, until '76. And I met him at a conference, I gave a speech at in December of '18, and I said, "Hey, whatever happened with your experiment?" And I'll describe the experiment in a minute. And he said, "Has anybody ever looked at how it worked out?" He said, "No." I said, "Gee, that'd be cool to look at. You have the data?" He said, "Oh yeah, sure." This other fellow had contacted me. He's a recent PhD from City University in New York and wanted to do some work with me because he had this immense data set on citations which he had gotten and had really constructed very carefully. I said, "Let's get together and do something evaluating the experiment," which I'll talk about in a second. So that's the genesis of this paper, why this quite diverse group of people. Him I met each of them once, how we got together. The question is very simple. Is refereeing productive? And not productive how? Well, the purpose of what we're doing is twofold. One, to have a scholarly impact. Two, to have an impact in the real world. I can't measure the real world impact very readily, but I do have ways, and have done many papers to measure scholarly impact. How much does it cost? What's the benefit? What's the cost? And is there a better way of doing it? I mean, if the benefits are zero, why should we be spending the time doing it? Because the costs are clearly non-zero. And Economic Inquiry, the journal that Wes Wilson is the editor-in-chief of, did an experiment, as I say, which we can evaluate and so on. The question is, how long does it take to publish in economics? And I mean, we've all got horror stories. I mean, actually, I've been fortunate. I think the longest time from initial submission of a paper at some journal to publication, actually, it was 7 years. So, I mean, it can be that long. And most of mine have been like from initial submission somewhere till eventual publication, 2 or 3 years. Anyway, this looks at not the top 4 journals in economics, but a bunch of quite good journals, all of which, fortunately, every article they would list the submission date, and then they had the journal the issue was published in. And you can see, get used to this here, you can see, this is the kernel density of this frequency distribution. You can see the median is about 27 months from initial submission at the journal where it was finally published, not the first journal to which it was submitted, which in most of these cases, my guess is I've published in 4 or 5 of these. In most cases, that was not the first place I sent it, okay? You can imagine what's going on. The median is 27 months. The 95th percentile, the 90th is 47 months. There's a hell of a long right tail there. This is the same graph for 5 social science journals for which I could also find submission publication date. One lower level sociology journal, European Sociological Review. This one, which is sort of social science and health. But the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology is a real biggie, by the way, in the psych literature. Journal of Applied Psychology is the same way. APSR is the premier journal in that field, okay? Notice, the graphs look alike, except this one goes out to 40 months. There wasn't a single paper that was lasting more than 40 months from initial submission to eventual publication. I'm quite sure if I were to take journals of the quality of these last 3 and do the same thing over here, it'd be even further pulled out. Okay? So, I hadn't done this in the first draft of this paper, and I said, well, you know, economics isn't so bad. It's quite typical. I can publish this in Science to talk about how general this issue is. Having done this, I realized this is a uniquely economics phenomenon. We are basically different from everybody else in ways which I view, this is Rahashim here, we screw ourselves over, okay? And anybody who's been a department chair or committee head should realize that we are basically making it harder for our people, sorry, the young people here, to get promoted, okay? And I can assure you, I mean, I've been submitting papers to journals since, I think since fall of '67. First 2 got turned down. And it didn't used to take this long. You know this, if you've been in this business a long time. There's tremendous change in the norm. And the question is, what is causing this and what can we do about it? Okay, so how much refereeing goes on? This is trying to measure the cost. I surveyed the editors of the top 4 journals, AER, JP, QJ, and Econometrica. How many referee reports did you get a year? And the average was 2,500 per journal, okay? There are, in journal citation reports, about 363 economics journals. So you figure each of them is getting 800 reports. How long does it take to write a referee report? I don't know. I said 4 hours. My co-author said that's very quick. I'm impatient and I just can't read this rubbish most of the time. Just get bored. They said 5 hours, okay? So figure 5 hours. Who's doing it? Well, referees are disproportionately more senior people, people at fancier schools, etc. That's no surprise. I take the salary of assistant professors at top BA granting colleges, like my young colleagues at Barnard, for example, would be a good example. Their wage is about $85,000 for 9 months. 60% time VOT is a fraction of wages is about correct. There's a very large survey paper on this I've used in consulting projects. Altogether, taking these things, I figure the costs in economics alone of refereeing are $50 million. And that ignores, as somebody pointed out to me recently, very cleverly, the cost of the author spending his or her time rewriting the things to no useful purpose. This is a minimal cost. And I think it's fairly high, unless you argue that by refereeing you improve your own scholarship. I think I've done about well over 500 reports. If I could think of 2 of them that made my own life better off, I'd be hard put to do that. Okay, so I don't find that argument cogent, although others may differ. Okay. Here's the experiment that Economic Inquiry did. This was not Wes Wilson. This was Preston McAfee, who was the editor-in-chief for a while. But Preston said, he wrote the following things out. If you submit under no revisions, I, the co-editor, will either accept or reject. There will not be a request for revision. I'll ask referees, is it better to publish as is or reject it? Why or why not? This returns referees to their roles as evaluators. And I've said these days, most referees think of themselves as unindicted co-authors. And regrettably, the editors indulge that fantasy. That's what takes so long. There'll be anonymous reports. If you get an acceptance, you can publish it without changes. If the referee made a point about a minor problem and put it in the report, of course you'd fix it. Excuse me. Don't try to eat and talk at the same time. This is not an experiment in the usual sense. It's not randomized. We need to think about selection, which we will. It's a policy change, and the authors choose and adapt to it. Any of you submitted there in the last 10 years? You're in my sample anyway.
That's right. I didn't choose this option.
You the regular or the
Regular.
fast? Okay,
Yeah.
I did too. I don't know why I did, because the paper had been turned down 3 times. And I should, given my demographics, we should have done the fast track. We didn't. All right, and there's a third issue here too. Okay, anyway, that's what's going on here. Question is, what are the data? They published in the decade 09 through 18, 935 papers, okay? During a 10-year period. We got rid of papers shorter than 10 pages, because they tend often to be comments kinds of thing. I've done that in one of my other gossip papers recently. If we didn't know what track they used or who co-edited it, if it was a presidential address or miscellaneous, but we're still left with about 90% almost of the original sample, okay? And that's the thing, because we also have information on a much larger sample of rejected papers, which track they chose too. There were 1,718 authors of these 800 papers. Obviously, it's guessing we're talking about. The average one, the median one, had 2 authors. There were only 3 papers that had more than 4 authors, which, I mean, to me, it's a lot already. And we're going to look at the information on the 1,718 authors who are authors number 1 through 4. Okay? We got, this is my dirty work, we got their CV or picture or something for every single one of them. You get it from Econ Lit, not Econ Lit, no. What's the one, the gossip thing that comes?
Job market.
Which one? No, not Job Market Rumors, but scurrilous website. No way. It's one of the other ones there, which some people put their personal information on. Well, you look them up on the web and you get a picture and a data. We got their PhD year, and thus their PhD age, and we got their gender from a picture or from asking around, okay, for each of these people. The co-author had data from the Web of Science, okay? This is the ISI thing out of Pennsylvania. This is not the same as Google Scholar. So it's only, the Web of Science is only things that were published, okay? So if I publish a paper this year, the odds of it appearing in the Web of Science as being cited this year are close to 0, because the paper that cites it has to be published too, okay? So we're going to get Web of Science citations from the year the person submitted, year T, and 5 years back from that. Okay? This is a measure not of the outputs, a measure of the inputs the person brings to this process. So those are the first set of the data. For each article, we knew the track it was submitted under, the time from submission to first decision, submit to final, number of rounds of refereeing, and the citations to that paper in the year it was published and for all years up through 2018. So it can be as many year it was published and 8 years afterwards, or just the year it was published, depending upon whether it's 09 or 2018. Okay?
So is that true also, sort of the disciplines differences in terms of rounds of refereeing? Is it much more common in economics for us to go through multiple?
It's gotta be, but I don't know for sure, okay? But I can't believe, given the graph I showed you, 1B, that that's based on multiple rounds. It just isn't gonna happen. I mean, the typical thing, I've been told by a few editors of other journals, is, look, if I like the paper, I say, you do it. If you can do all this, I will publish it. If not, we're done, okay? But this back and forth business, it's just unbelievable. The guy I was talking to at dinner last night said he's on his 2nd round of JPE, 15 months for the 1st round, and I told him, you know, I know the editor very, very well. You'll be in it for 3 or 4 years before you get it done, if you're lucky. Now, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, I may die tomorrow. I mean, my life expectancy isn't that good. But I don't care. I'm not up for tenure anymore. But if I were in my 3rd or 4th year, this would be driving me nuts. This would not be good at all. Anyway, these are the data. The outcome is here, citations post-publications, which you might object. If you say my papers are important but nobody cites them, I say, well, you're probably deluding yourself that they're important. This is to me the standard measure of scholarly impact. And other things may matter, but this is one which I think is a very good indicator. All right, so first of all, are these papers that are done by different tracks, are they more or less likely to be accepted depending upon the track they submit under? So here we have it. This is acceptance rates by track. Are those things different? Well, statistically they sure are. Economically, come on, there's no difference. 15 or 16%, that's the same. They're statistically highly different, but that's about all. So I don't think that there's really any difference on the track you submit under. Okay. Next question. Is there a difference in the time from when you submit to the time you hear by track? Okay. So here is fast track papers. These are ones that are published, and here are regular track papers. And notice they're a little bit different also. I gotta fix this graph up, this isn't good. But basically the median here is about here, and the median here is over here. They're very similar. There's a little bit of a longer tail here, that's why I have that. But basically there's very little beyond a year. Okay? In other words, almost everybody has heard within a year a yes or no or maybe decision. So there's no difference there. Let's see. It's also little difference by type. I won't even bother showing you this one. Taking both rejected and accepted papers. Whichever track you submit under, you're going to hear back initially at the same time. There's a little bit of a long tail. The big difference is the time from initial submission till final decision. So here is submission to acceptance regular track. The median is over here, about a year and a half, with a quite long tail going out to 3.5 years. Whereas the relevant comparison is fast track ones over here, and essentially your decision is done within a year if you're accepted. So the difference is not so much in the median, it's just there's a very fat upper tail for regular track things, and the reason is because of the over and over resubmission business. And the question is, so if you look at averages, doesn't matter, but if you worry about risk, which I would if I were an assistant professor up for tenure, I'd be terribly bothered by that risk. We'll come back to this thinking about how to adjust for problems, okay? We're going to now do some regressions. I did Poisson estimation, which people love. I did negative binomial, all the fancy stuff that you can punch a button and state it and do, I did it, okay? It makes no difference what technique you use, the answers are the same. I did quantile regression also. You name it, we did it. Push a button, I can do that, okay? Let's look at the impact of accepted papers by track, and here's the impact. Fast track, regular track, these are characteristics of the papers first. The oldest authors on fast track tend to be older than the regular track. If there's an older person, not by much, but they are significantly different, these are standard deviations. Older people would be more likely to submit fast track. Multiple authored, more likely. Women, more likely, if it's a female author. And no difference in the length. Finally, the most cited author on a paper, if the most cited author is more heavily cited, they're also more likely to submit fast track. So the submission tracks are not just randomly chosen. Something is going on there. Next, the problem is that of the regular track acceptances, half of them were essentially accepted after one round. So I don't know about your paper. Did you go through multiple rounds or not? It's not that long ago.
It was just one round.
Okay, me too. I mean, they said this, please make these changes, but if you make the changes, we're not going to send it back to the referees. Yeah?
But don't you know, we don't know history of papers before they arrive.
We'll get there. Hold on a second. We'll get there. We do actually, but not from this data set, obviously. Yeah, we'll certainly talk about that. Okay. All right, so anyway, we have that. This is just the means. Look at the author characteristics and how well the authors have done in terms of citations. This is the pre-submission citation of the authors. Notice the median was 30 for the first author, mean 181. That's a lot of skewness, right? And that's true for second author, third author, and fourth author. It's completely standard. A few people are very heavily cited, most of them almost nothing. Papers, the same thing. Some papers are extremely well cited, even in a top journal, others are ignored, which is why one can't simply say, oh, Joe Blow published in the AER. I say, big deal. Look at the paper itself. There's tremendous heterogeneity. Here is the post-publication outcome impact of these papers in years 0, 2, 4, 6, and 8. And what you can see is the median per year is about 1. And most of them aren't heavily cited. On the other hand, the 95th percentile rises quite steadily, but still not very high. This is not the top journal in the field. It's a good general second or even third level journal. I don't think that's unfair. Okay. Next, let's estimate a model of citations and hold constant for a bunch of things, including the track, which is the crucial X variable, and whether the paper goes through one round regular track or is invited back for additional resubmissions, and hold constant for a bunch of things. We'll start off with just these two variables and then add more and more controls. So here is the equation just there. Fast track, one round regular track, holding constant for nothing. Fast tracks get much more heavily cited subsequently. One round regular track, not quite significantly differently more heavily cited. Okay? Let's start adding covariates. Let's add the number of years post-publication, which is essentially mechanical. The more years you've had, the more you're going to get cited. Issue number, there are 4 issues per year. The issue that is published in December, papers are cited less than that published in March. Why? Because they've had less time to be out there in the ether. Co-editors, we worried about whether some co-editors are just nastier or are refereeing or editing in an area where stuff doesn't get published. We added that in here. We added in JEL category, of which there are many. We aggregated them into 10. Maybe some fields are more heavily cited. Doesn't matter very much. Then we added the number of authors. Doesn't matter much. Number of pages. Didn't matter because the average page length was the same by type. And finally, over here, we're going to add whether one of the authors was a woman. Okay. And the answer is yes. Other things the same. Female authored papers, if there is a woman, are cited less. I could do it if it's a one-authored paper. Is it a woman being the sole author? The answers look almost the same, not quite significant. Okay. Et cetera, et cetera. Needless to say, my Barnard colleagues love this result, not surprising. Barnard is an all-women's college. So, and I think half of our faculty are women. Then we add in, not surprisingly, the citations that each author had previously. What's amazing, not surprising on number 1, but other ones, even the other authors being more heavily cited, leads to more citations, other things equal to this paper. Even, it's not significant, but even the few 4-authored papers, if the 4th author is more cited, this paper gets cited more. Okay? So this does suggest that, in fact, multiple rounds are worse, if anything. But I haven't taken care of other issues. First issue to take care of is yours. Okay? Maybe the fast-track papers have just been through more and more rounds of other journals, and the authors are just sick of the whole damn thing and submit it quick, just to get it all there here. Okay? So what we did was we surveyed authors of all the fast-track articles. Remember, the sample is much smaller in the last 4 years. And we also took random samples, literally random every nth number, of all the papers that were published through regular track 1 round another equal size sample, all those with regular track multiple rounds, okay? So we're trying to get 3 equal size samples, sending out emails to people with, we did this in spring of last year. It took, I think, repeated pesterings of people, okay? I love to pester people, I'm good at it. We got a 62% response rate. Pretty good, huh? It really is good. I was very pleased about that, okay? And we asked people, how many previous submissions had you done on this paper? How many of those submissions came back with a referee report, as opposed to a desk recheck? And finally, how many reports did you get? And so this gets to your question, I think. And the answer is, so here's the fast track papers, 36. There were 37 regular track 1 round, 41 regular track 2 rounds. Let's look at the numbers here. Fast track 2.1 submissions, regular track 2.38. These are not significantly different. Getting reports, the fast track actually had gotten more journals with reports. Again, not statistically different. Okay. And number of reports received, almost significantly different, mainly because there were a couple of outliers, one of them by a Barnard colleague of mine, which got immense numbers of referee reports. My colleague at Barnard said he'd gotten 11 reports on this paper and was absolutely sick of it and submitted fast track. Okay. And that's almost statistically significant. The neat thing here is, and this will be more important later on, 1 round versus multiple rounds, there's nothing there, okay? So it's not the case, except for this one thing on fast track, that they've had more rounds or more prior referees. These papers are very similar in terms of their prior treatment by the journals as a whole. Okay. That takes care of that. Next, the most important thing in life these days is endogeneity, as I mentioned yesterday. Let's actually think about it, rather than just say, hey, it's endogenous, we need to find an instrument. This is basically a rationale for an empirical model, okay? So I want to publish, I want to have an impact on the world, which will also in the end raise my salary if I cared about that. I can choose fast track or regular track. And the return, my wage is a function of the citations I get in the usual concave approach, okay? More citations raise my wage at a decreasing rate, which in fact is empirically demonstrated countless times. You have a colleague here who's worked on this. The Hilmers, are they here?
Not here today.
They're not here today, no, but they've done a lot of stuff on this. In fact, one of their papers is a Hilmer, and somebody else, which I cite. And I did a paper on this with the quadratic in '82. I've been doing this for ages. That's my first gossip paper. Anyway, my PhD age, no question, and we talked about this a minute ago, getting a citation when you're young is better for you than when you're old, right? And so that says that there, and it's probably a decreasing rate, alpha is greater than 1. And there is some shifter, which at certain ages might make it really valuable for me to get a citation and get a publication. And clearly I'm not at that age. Okay? Let's look at the question of whether I should submit fast track or regular track. And you can show that I'll submit regular track if the acceptance probability is higher than fast track. That's obvious, okay? If I have a longer horizon over which to reap the opportunities. And finally, if the gain for doing so at a particular age I'm at is higher. So I'm going to choose R if these things are the case. If it's quick, if it's not that much longer on the regular track, I'll do that. If the gains of submitting on regular track are greater at my age, if the acceptance is higher, and if there's no particular reason to do it now as compared to later. In other words, there's no special gain at my current stage of my career. And finally, if the horizon is larger. Okay? All right. So we're going to use these as proxies. We're going to predict the track. The more cited the most senior author is, more likely to do fast track because the marginal gains are smaller, as you saw in that model, right? If I'm in an age range when it really matters, this is the prime instrument, by the way. If I'm in an age range when it really matters to get the darn thing out and have an acceptance and get published, then I'm more likely to do fast track. What's the age range? I have no idea. But what we can do, which we don't do much in this business anymore, is we can search over a whole bunch of ranges and find the range that maximizes the likelihood function. And we even by doing that, get the whole shape of the likelihood function around those ages. We can get a confidence band for what the upper and lower end of the range is. We don't do this much anymore. It used to be called partial likelihood maximization when I was doing this stuff as a kid. Okay? And lastly, if the senior author is older, again, the horizon is shorter, just get it out. So why I submitted with my then, see, when we submitted this paper, I was 68 and the co-author was 50. I don't know why we submitted regular track. It's just stupid. So I screwed out my model here, actually, in the sense that if I could pull myself out of the data, the model would work better. But that's not kosher. You can't pull yourself out just because you want to improve the results. All right, so let's do this. Let's do a first stage estimation. So here's a probit on fast track or not. And we searched over the range of ages. It turns out that the likelihood function maximizing age range is between 5 years and 10 years. And the confidence band around 5 is between 3 and 7, around 10 is between 8 and 12. Does that make sense? Yeah, what's going on there? Why are they doing this? We all know the answer, right? Yeah, they want to get there up for tenure very soon. They need to get something on the vita. I mean, when I started talking about this, everybody said, well, what about endogeneity? I said, what do you think? And almost everybody said tenure time. Not everybody, so this got a lot of publicity on blogs a couple of weeks ago when it came out in a working paper. And I looked at some of the comments. One of the comments was, yeah, there's a lot of endogeneity. What do they do about that? Rainfall? That was the stupidest damn comment. I mean, I don't respond to these things. And it's not rainfall. It's what you'd expect. But any person who's in this business would expect. And what, if I had to face this world, if I'd have had to face this world 45 years ago, I'd have behaved the same way too. But certainly, highly significant impact of being near or around tenure time. The most senior author, almost significant, not quite. More heavily cited, that's a rather subtle thing, I think. Also more likely.
Do things look similar if that's not used as an exclusion restriction? That's the one I like the least of your instruments. No, the citations,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Okay, I mean, it lowers the pseudo R squared here, obviously. Yeah. But no, it doesn't make any difference. I mean, the thing that's driving this, they excluded is this baby here, which is part, no, it doesn't matter. But I think, I'm not sure you did a footnote on that. Without cites in IV, in the instrument. I'll check that out. It's easy to check. But I know the answer. I did it because I played around with all kinds of forms of this, of course. Okay, so instead of doing least squares,
yeah. Another thing, not similar, but given that few papers are cited a lot, as you said, have you tried the quantile regression?
Of course. Yeah, we did quantiles, I say. I think the Poisson sense, it doesn't make any difference.
Even top 10%?
No, because in fact, I mean, those papers, the top N%, whatever you want, are no more likely to be fast track than regular track or regular one round, other things equal. That's why it doesn't matter. You might put in a note about that. I wanted to keep this short, this paper. Okay, quantile in footnote. Anyway, do exactly the same thing we did in table 4, except now we're going to include, instead of the actual track, we're going to include whether the fast track using the instrument. Okay? This is completely standard technique these days, except we had a model describing the instrument. And you can see, it's still there, right? And there's still significantly more citations of the fast track, essentially 0 for one round regular compared to multiple rounds. Start adding the variables that we added before, and we go to the end and start adding these characteristics of the authors: gender, and then author citations. And the fast track goes from being significant and positive to being negative and approaching statistical significance, which really surprised me. I did not expect that result. But this baby here, one round regular compared to the suited multiple rounds, there's no difference at all. If you do with or without instrumentation, the multiple round does nothing, which is the crucial finding of this paper.
So in terms of interpretation, so how do you think about sort of the local average treatment effect, right? Of the marginal person sort of near tenure who's submitting to a fast track because they want to, you know, because it may be critical and they're getting tenure. So yeah, I mean, what do you how do you think about that margin?
I think that margin is not well seen here. Yes, it pays them to do it, partly because they might get accepted quickly, but if nothing else, what's the outcome for them? They're not going to have to drag on.
Yeah.
That's the crucial point. It's not within these data, but they can go somewhere else quickly rather than be dragged out here for 2 years.
Yeah, I just mean the type of scholar, you know, the type of scholar who's to be induced to submit this fast track because they're worried about sort of not getting tenure, and what kind of quality of paper that's going to get cited do we
Well,
think
but this
is going to
gets
come
to your other question. Now, you would probably argue, what is the quality of the scholars who age equal are going to submit this way? Well, it's not the superstars, right? And it's not the real losers, to use a Donald Trump phrase. Sorry about that. It's rather the people who are going to be at the margin, right? And so in that sense, the LATE is of an average person. So I don't think that's a problem. Now, by using this thing here in the instrument, which you have questions about, that might vitiate that problem, right? Because I've got it taken care of there. But the main point is these two results here, which I think I've beaten up as much as we can, there's just no difference within multiple versus single rounds. That's the crucial point. Yeah.
Maybe just to follow up on Jim's point, is the marginal decision of this person that's submitted because they're close to tenure, is it like a fast track at economic inquiry or a regular track at economic inquiry? Or is it fast track at economic inquiry versus regular track at a higher ranked journal? And maybe that explains that negative citation thing, because you're getting more papers that
They're crappy.
well, not necessarily crappy, but maybe they're good, but they're undercited because they end up at economic inquiry as opposed to like somewhere.
Yeah, but why should being in that's taken care of. All the papers in economic inquiry.
Right.
No, I thought you were going to say, which is a reasonable argument, that somehow these multiple round or regular round papers, so excuse me. I'm sorry. I thought you were going to say the multiple round papers are somehow inferior,
Well, that's a possibility too.
and they're only raised up by the multiple rounds. I can't disprove that,
Right.
except we do have the the co-editor identities in here. And if it's the case that in certain subspecialties or certain co-editors, of which there's huge numbers, they're just asking for more and more and raising things up. That's taken care of already. Beyond that, I can't prove that within co-editor and within subspecialty, that in fact the ones that go multiple rounds are the ones that are raised up to some acceptable level and somebody pays attention to them. But that's a rather convoluted argument compared to simple ones. Anyway, look, I mean, I'm not saying this is a proof of the way the world works. All I know is nobody's done this before. And it should be pretty depressing for you because it's a huge amount of time wasted and disturbance to people's life, okay? These are second round regular, as I say, all that. They've been more heavily refereed, okay, already. But we can't refute the argument that you made. I can refute your simple argument, but the general argument that these things are somehow worse, and only because of that last round, raised to be as good as the one rounds, everything else the same, is possible. Show me some other evidence on this. Okay, conclusions. Conclusion is very simple. The extra refereeing makes no difference in terms of the impact of the paper. I think people like this result because everybody's damn sick of this business of dealing with useless comments. I think of all the papers I've published in referee journals in my life, I think there are exactly 2 where a referee comment, both times on the first round, really made a difference in terms of the substance of the paper. Is that right? Yeah, that one. Think of the major papers I've written in life. 1 major paper, 1 minor paper, and that's it. And my guess is you've all had the same feeling, especially these days, because 1, I don't send the paper off till it's a 3rd draft. I've given it a lot of places. And 2, why do we have all the co-authors today? And we talked about this. I mean, in the 60s, 80% were sole authored. Today, at less than 20%. Why? Now, give me the usual explanation, and I'll give you my different explanation. The usual is, it requires so many different skills to get the paper out that there's a benefit from co-authoring with people who are different from you. My feeling is, no, nobody reads your papers anymore, and the only way you can get comments on your papers is to do them with somebody else who tells you when you screwed up. I mean, it's very hard to prove this, okay, but I'm convinced at least that's part of it. I mean, people used to read papers. I had a whole cadre of buddies with whom we exchanged papers for quite a long time. But I don't think people do that anymore. On the other hand, it's running around and giving your papers much more common now. Transportation is cheaper, as is communication. I mean, look at the papers in the top journals. I was looking at one yesterday. People list travel logs. Have you noticed that? That's what I call them. And I got one yesterday, had 25 places the person had given it. And I've seen as many in the mid-30s. Okay? Which to me, why are they bragging about their travel? I think it's embarrassing. Okay. So I think the notion of letting referees be judges rather than co-authors would not damage the quality of the enterprise in any way, A, and B, would save a heck of a lot of time, and C, would let people keep their jobs, or get fired from their jobs also, which doesn't bother me in the least, okay, more quickly. It'd be a tremendous saving for department heads, for authors, for referees, and for editors also. And again, there's no other evidence on this. I think this is at least suggestive that maybe we ought to think differently about the social norm we've gotten ourselves into.
Okay.
Any comment, suggestion?
Do you have any conjecture that this finding might carry over to higher level journals?
Now the question is, clearly they don't do experiments like this, but the question is, does multiple rounds make a difference? Okay, that's the question. I don't know. I mean, that's a standard concern. I mean, who cares about economic inquiry that much? But in fact, do the multiple rounds at the AER make a difference?
Not in AER, maybe top 30, 40 journals.
Well, this is already in the top 30 and 40. This is in the bottom part of it. No, I want top 5. I mean, one of my young sort of colleagues at Texas just got a paper in the RE Studs, and I think he submitted it there 5 years ago when he's finishing grad school. He's up for tenure this year.
It's not the way of asking this question is that after they see your paper, do that to change their mind.
Well, I'll tell you about that, okay? I've done a lot of gossip papers, and the question is, do they have any impact? That's the question. I'll give you one example, which is actually cute. So we published a paper, a colleague and I published a paper, my only publication in Econometrica, on elections to be a fellow of the Econometric Society. What determines it? And the crucial things that determined it were, 1, if you were an econometrician, you had almost no chance, which I just love that result. And the second one was, if you're Israeli or French, you had much higher chance. Okay? I mean, my co-author is an econometrician. He loved it. I always felt the Israelis and the French favored each other. I mean, they voted for each other. So we were both right. And did it make any difference? The next year's election, they elected a huge number of econometricians. After that, it reverted back to the same almost 0. So we had a very small short run, very large short run effect, but no impact in the long run. This one, I think, if people pay attention to it, I think it will have an impact in the long run. And I think people realize, I think that the response to the paper so far suggests people realize we're just on a screwed up track. And may well, I hope so, are looking for some evidence to support a reversion to a norm that we used to have. But, I mean, we're just killing ourselves in this business. Yeah.
Well, if I go to the top journal and read a paper, I'm impressed that all of them have been very thoroughly vetted. So I don't have to waste my time. I mean, I know that I don't have time to read all the interesting papers that are in the top journals, but I know that those papers have been carefully screened and been through, maybe they've been presented. The fact that they've been presented many places is
I think that's more
reassuring.
important. Okay, but then what's the gain, though? I mean, yes, they've been carefully screened, yes, they've been presented, but why screen them 5 times? That's the question. And there are 5 or 6 round papers, believe me, even at this journal. Now, I've been through 3 round papers. I agree with you, it does give a stamp of approval. The question is the marginal gain in that stamp higher on the second? Is there any marginal gain in the second or third round in terms of your being able to say, yes, that paper made it? That's the crucial question.
But what can I ask you about intensity of revision? Sometimes, just quick revision, other times intensive revision.
That we can't get at.
Yes.
I mean,
I imagine you have 5 revisions and some of them are pretty like quick revision.
as I said in my own experience, I mean, the one case where it really made, in my view, some of them took time, but did they really substantially change, in my view, the quality of the paper? Just that one time. Although, you got to get published and you deal with this stuff and do whatever they want. But I used to say, if the referee says the sky is blue with purple polka dots, yep. First sentence, sky is blue with purple polka dots. Because, I mean, it doesn't matter for anything substantive, and you might as well mollify this person who thinks he or she should be writing your paper for you. I realize this is rather curmudgeonly of me, but, I mean, the profession is just all screwed up, and it didn't always be that way either. That's what bothers me. Okay, thank you very much.